season starts here, the Vancouver Boat Show.
Hello.
Hi, everybody. Hi. Thank you for joining us. It's great to have you all here at VIBS. And if you happen to experience any technical issues during this session, please contact me, your moderator, in the chat window, and I'll do anything that I can do from my end. Otherwise, if you come up with questions during the presentation, please feel free to type your question in the Q&A box, and then we will be reading them out. So at this point, I think we're in a good shape to get started. So it's our great pleasure to present to you Marla Hedman and Henry Tkachyk with Getting Ready to Charter for All Levels.
Hello, everyone. It's very odd to be here and not see any of you, but a very big welcome to all of you. If you're new to sailing, please do, in fact, send us a note. We'd love to know who's here and who's not. We're assuming that some of you have a little bit of experience, and so a lot of this will make sense to you ahead of time and it'll be a good refresher. Right now, Henry's going to do a little introduction about Nanaimo Yacht Charters. Henry, are you there?
I am here. Thanks for that, Marla. Sure. So we wanted to give you a bit of background on Nanaimo Yacht Charters. So we are both a yacht charter and sailing school. We offer a pretty flexible range of chartering experiences, from bareboat charters for experienced skippers to cruise and learns for beginning sailors who are looking to learn how to sail. We also can offer educational vacations for those who want to experience sailing but aren't yet sure if it's for them and wanted to get out on the water with some experienced folks like Marla or myself to gain that experience and see if it's something you want to proceed further with.
Fantastic. Also, we'd like to bring the attention to everyone that's joining us that Nanaimo Yacht Charters actually has a virtual show booth running manned full time during the boat show. So if any other questions come up that we're not able to answer in the time that we're given, questions out of the ordinary, make sure you know that we have got somebody on duty for the whole show there, and it may be even us. So please do contact Nanaimo Yacht Charters either by email, through their website, or through their virtual show booth. So Henry, do you want to tell everyone that's joining us a little bit about yourself and your background?
You bet. I'm a recent transplant to Vancouver Island, moved here in Nanaimo a couple of years ago, and it's been a slow migration from the prairies for me, getting ever closer to the coast and some of my favorite cruising grounds. I've been sailing for a little over 20 years, and honestly, I started teaching right out of the gate because I didn't know anyone who sailed. So every time I wanted to go sailing, I had to teach people with me, and my experience has just grown from there, from teaching friends and family to teaching new and soon to be new friends. Marla, how about yourself? We started around a similar time, but certainly different paths.
Yeah, absolutely. I was born and raised in Lake Country in northern Canada in the Canadian Shield area of Manitoba. And so always boating, like from the little time I was like 3 years old, I was like, please let me drive the boat. And when I was about 12, I took sailing lessons for the first time and was really, really became entranced by the magic of it all, for sure. So I then was away from it for a long time, and like you, I was moving ever closer to the West Coast, went to school in University in Edmonton, lived in Calgary, lived in Banff, ski industry. But the call of the water was very, very powerful. And the call of being on boats is it's just a passion for me. So I started out doing drop-in sailing with a charter company in Vancouver, just the best experiences I could ever have hoped for. Went on to get training, became a very loyal charter client, and have never looked back. I've been chartering all over the world since then, and I love working with the charter company and helping people achieve their dreams. So yeah, hopefully I'll meet all of you who are out in the audience at some time in the future.
Yeah, once the salt gets in your blood and just that enjoyment of sharing it with other people, it's quite addictive. So awesome. Well, we've got actually quite a bit of content to cover today. We've broken it down into 4 prime sections. We're going to focus on planning your trip and really things that you can start doing now for this summer or maybe even next summer's trip. We'll talk about skipper preparation and things that you can and should be preparing for as a skipper leading your crew. Talk a little bit about crew preparation, and then we'll finish our session with just talking about the charter experience from arriving at the charter base, reviewing and checking out the boat, and just making sure you're ready to depart and the things that you'll probably want to know while you're on the trip itself. So you've decided to charter, you're excited to go do a wonderful trip with friends and family. The very first thing is, where are you going to go? We are very fortunate on the West Coast here to just have a wealth of amazing cruising grounds just right outside our door. And so picking one of those really is the very first thing that you're going to want to do. There's lots of different reasons to pick one over the other, but things that you'll typically want to take into consideration is how long is your trip? Can you get to some of the places that you'd like to get to? The types of activities or the lifestyle that you'd like to lead, and really the experience you're looking for with your trip. The different charter grounds offer different amenities and different experiences, and you know, understanding those things will help to shape that for you. We're not going to spend a bunch of time today, but I will point you to a seminar we're having tomorrow afternoon at 4, where we will get into in-depth on these charter or on these cruising grounds rather, and share some of our favorite destinations to give you some ideas. If you're not able to join us there, then the Nanaimo Yacht Charters website under destination has some excellent information, including some suggested itineraries into these cruising locations. So now that you've decided where you want to go to, it's really time to start planning for your trip now. And Marla, I know you and I are both big believers that the more planning you can do up front, the more enjoyable and relaxing your trip will be. So when you start to plan for a trip, what are the important things for you and how do you go about it?
Absolutely, man. I'm so passionate about navigation. I love it. I like to make sure that I have either A, the charts, or B, the charts loaded onto an app. And in my case, I like to use the Navionics app. I also like to make sure that I've got the cruising guides. I'm a big believer in these great cruising guides. In particular, we're going to give a little plug for a couple of publications out here on the West Coast, the Dream Speaker Cruising Guides. We'll give those of you in the audience some links to those throughout this presentation. And also Docks and Destinations is another one. So not only is there a government publication, sailing directions, it's a little dry, a little black and white, not a lot of pictures, but the cruising guides are really a big deal. And they help when you take an overall look at the chart you're going to be doing your cruising in. They will help you become well versed in what to expect when you get to these areas. So I love sitting at home months ahead of time, planning out these trips, be it here on the West Coast or over in Europe or down in the Caribbean. So that's the start for me. And I think that at this time, you know, take a look, those of you that are in the audience joining us today, be honest with yourselves about what do you really know about navigation, and do you understand what the tools, the aids to navigation are all about. So let us know if you need some help in that direction, and we can direct you on how to become, you know, more efficient in that. But it is a hugely important deal. You've got to keep yourself, your crew, and your boat safe, right? Indeed. What are some of the other publications, Henry, that are your favorites when you're planning a trip?
Yeah, I agree. I like the Dream Speaker cruising guides myself. One of the things that I find very useful for them is, while they're not navigation aids per se, they give you a very accurate depiction of the anchorages. And it can give you a really good idea of the size of the anchorages and the placement of the boats. And as you're planning your locations, they can be very useful to make use of that. And then I do use the government charts as well. I've got a set of the basics at home here, and I find it very helpful to just be able to look at route planning and to understand where we can get to and how long it's going to take and practically what the trip could look like.
Wonderful. At this time, we'd also like to say that another publication we are looking at constantly, and again, it's either an actual publication that we've got in our hands, or it's going to be an app or a website that we are looking up tides and currents. That information, especially out here on the west coast of Canada, we have some of the biggest tidal ranges from low tide up to high tide. It's astounding the volume of water that comes roaring in here to our inland sea and up through the Gulf Islands and up into Desolation Sound, the volume of water that comes from the Pacific into these areas. So not only are we out in the Strait of Georgia having, 1 to 2 knots of current in some places, but then that volume of water gets squished in between these island passages and really, really speeds up. So it's not as simple as just getting on a boat and merrily going sailing along. There's a lot of navigation you have to understand because of tides and currents and times to go between islands to get from point A to point B. So really, really love that, those publications. And we also have some links to some online resources that you can use when you're at home a month ahead of your trip doing some planning. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, no, I thought we'd share some very helpful resources here that we use on a regular basis. As I said, I do use the paper charts and the dividers personally when I plan the trips out. It's very nice to have that tactical view and to be able to do some research. And then I've got the Dream Speaker cruising guides. I can show you an example of one of them here that are very popular. Hopefully everybody can see that clearly. This one is for Howe Sound and the Sunshine Coast. They're very useful for giving you ideas and helping you plan your trip and just understanding the destinations that you would want to get to. There are many other cruising guides that are out there. I know the Wagoner ones are very popular, as are others, and docks and destinations. And then excellent. I would say, Marla, your comment on tides and currents are also critical as well. I find that's a very critical part to planning our day and planning our sessions.
Great. Should we answer Ron's chat message there?
Sure, go ahead.
Great. Hi, Ron. Welcome to our panel today. We see your question about what type of qualifications that you would need. We heartily recommend doing a coastal navigation course, either a self-study at home with the manuals and the charts, or you can do an online study, or you could also join a sailing school who's running a coastal navigation course wherever you happen to be, which I don't know where you are, but we can certainly help you out with that. If you want to get in touch with us after the seminar, we'll give you some further direction about how to do that. So on top of having some sailing experience already, we will definitely be taking a look at what your navigation experience and background is. Okay, I hope that's a bit of a start there. So we hope to keep in touch with you. At this time, I'd also like to draw attention to the last point there, local publications, the Marine Blue pages and notices to mariners. Yeah, we love charts, like big promoters of paper charts on your boat, on your person doing your planning. Added to that, there's some more information that you can, round out your whole trip planning thing. And that's the Marine Blue pages. Out here on the West Coast, it's published by Pacific Yachting. And it is the entire region from like Seattle all the way up north, all of the services that are available for mariners, not only marinas and restaurants, but marine emergency sources, where you can get your boat hauled out, where you can stop to get parts, where you're going to find a dock that's close to downtown so you can go and do provisioning and things like that. So we really like to have that extra publication. So if you ever see it in your local marine store, or get in touch with Pacific Yachting and get a copy of that for your briefcase. And notices to mariners. You can actually get notices to mariners on the government website. What that means is that a lot of us have got old charts available to us. but every month, every week almost, there are changes that have to be updated on those charts. And so it's a good idea for you to take a look at updating any notices to mariners that may have come out for your particular charts for the trip that the area that you're going to be doing a trip. We can't walk you through it on this seminar, but if you want to get in touch with us at a later date to help you go through how to manage notices to mariners and make notes for yourself about some boats that have sunk or a new installation that happened, or, all sorts of things. It's definitely a good idea to be aware of notices to mariners. Anything you'd like to add about that, Henry?
You know what, I think one of the points I would make here, and we've talked about the paper charts and the paper materials that are available, and there's good reason for that. The electronics technology has advanced, but it's not foolproof and it's not without failure. And always knowing how to use the paper materials and always having them on board are very, very critical. If any of you have taken a coastal navigation course, I'm sure part of that on every course is talking about the electronic failures that happen and cause people to have incidents on the water. So we definitely all make use of the electronic technology that's available, but always double check and back up and have the paper charts available in case things go wrong. I can tell you from personal experience, last year I was chartering when the fires came in, and the smoke was so heavy we could not even barely see across the inlet that we were in, and the GPS simply doesn't update fast enough to drive by it. And so we were forced to doing DR plotting to get our way out of a very long inlet because the electronic technology just wasn't really applicable for what we needed it for. So even in the best of conditions, even without equipment failure, we got into a situation where having the paper charts was hugely handy and understanding how to use them effectively.
Yeah, I think it's a really good time to realize that GPS chart plotters and whatnot, not only are they maybe not updated physically with hazards, but that they're only 95% true, right? So that 5% means that you should be always looking around and observing where you are, as well as taking a look at your depth sounder. So I guess it's pretty obvious that we love navigation. So a couple of other things that we wanted to talk about are don't be too ambitious when you're doing a rough plan for your routing for your charter. So what we mean by that is that you're supposed to be out there having a vacation and really, really enjoying yourself. So we'd like you to consider that you want to be very manageable distances, and assuming that your boat is actually only going to go at the most, it's a general 5 knots per hour to cover off any of the distances that you'll notice between your destinations. So we like to shorten the legs. Plus, it's really important to plan your first day very clearly, because that's a day of a lot of excitement and a lot of adrenaline. And it's a good idea to get someplace by late afternoon and then finally take a breather and really absorb where you are and start enjoying it. And also, it's a really good idea to plan your last day, because you are going to have some must-do things that you have to accomplish, and that is possibly getting through a slack water time. That's going through a pass that you don't want to go through when there's a lot of current. You have to go and get fuel, and you have to have the boat back at the dock at a certain time. So day 1, day 2, and last day, very important. But in between, don't be too ambitious and have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and be flexible to make decisions based on weather and people's enjoyment. How about the provisioning stop? What do you recommend about that stuff, Henry?
Yeah, so I found that when I plan my trips, as you said, I plan my first day, I plan my last day, and then I always plan for a provisioning stop sometime about mid-trip. One of the things we'll talk about on the meal planning is that if you've not spent a bunch of time on the boat, space is always a critical factor. The fridges are smaller, the freezers are smaller, and probably most importantly, the ability to handle garbage and recycling is also restricted as well. So I found if you plan a stop midweek, you can offload your garbage, you can get some fresh produce, you can re-provision what you've missed. And it's a nice break if you've been on the boat all week to get off for a few hours at least, if you're not otherwise doing it. And that gives you a nice framework to plan the rest of your trip around. You know your first day, you know your last day, and you've got something in the middle to shoot for. And then fill in the blanks with what makes sense, or leave it a little bit open and follow the wind, so to speak.
That's good. You know, for meal plans, we've got some advice for people that we can, help you with online. Henry's going to pop up a slide later, but we do recommend it that in times of COVID in particular now, that you phone ahead to the marinas that you've put in your trip plan, and also check to see that their food services are open and that their fuel services are open. And if they have water, if we're having a dry summer, for instance, there is not going to be water at some docks. So you really want to know ahead of time what's going on with all of those types of services in particular. And by the way, there are some marinas that will charge you to drop your garbage bags full of garbage. Okay. Does that bring up anything else for you around that too, Henry?
Yeah, I mean, excellent point about COVID. I know last year throughout the season, some marinas were not accepting transient boats, particularly in some of the smaller islands where medical facilities were restricted. So definitely call ahead and understand what the restrictions may be. In some cases, we weren't allowed off the dock. In some cases, they weren't welcoming visitors. Fuel docks that used to be operational were now not operational. So it definitely had a bit of an impact. The other, sort of anecdotal item I would add on planning on the last day, I have been guilty of over planning my last day many times, and I can tell you that Murphy has a wonderful way of enforcing his law when you overstretch yourself on the last day. Most storms I've been forced to sail through have been on the last day because I've left myself too aggressive of a final day, and I have to get back and I have to travel through conditions I otherwise would have avoided. So I can tell you from personal experience, it's much more fun if you don't put yourself in that situation than if you do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really, really good advice. I plan quite regularly 2-week charter flotilla trips in Europe and in the Caribbean. And I have to say that, we'll have an itinerary that has us going to all these favorite places that we just know we're going to love. But when we're actually there, we quite often end up blowing off about a third of the itinerary. Number one, due to weather, of course. So it's always make good decisions and choose to stay where you are if the weather's bad. But number two, people are just having such a great time being where they are. That's like, you know what, let's just stay here for a couple of more days. So to be able to expect that flexibility and those types of desires of your crew and be comfortable with changing up your plan.
For sure. The last thing you want to do is give up a great sailing day because you're on the clock and have to be someplace. It would break your heart if you didn't get another one. So I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the other things that I certainly do is I align my meal plan to my route. Are we planning on stopping at a marina? Do we want to eat out? If not, I will plan more simple meals for longer travel days and more complex meals for shorter travel days where we can make a bit of a bigger mess. And then I do also really encourage you to consider the reduce, reuse, recycle. So with short storage of both fridge, freezer, and garbage, as you're putting a meal plan together, I think about ingredients that go into more than one dish. I think about reducing packaging, so taking the styrofoam off your meat and putting it in a Ziploc bag so you don't have the extra garbage. There's lots of things that you can do to reduce what you're going to bring on board and reduce what garbage you're going to have and recycling as a result. And you'll really appreciate planning for that in advance because it'll make it much, much easier, especially if you're in a position where you can't offload your garbage midweek. Being stuck with a large amount of smelly garbage and no place to store it effectively is not very pleasant.
Absolutely. And also, instead of having to go and bring a lot of extra packaging of, for instance, spices, salts and peppers, things like that, or do the shopping when you get to the base where you're picking up your boat, I actually recommend that people bring salts and peppers and cinnamon and nutmegs your favorite little few packages of tea, also maybe packages of nuts, your favorite nuts, because sometimes, especially when you're going on a trip to Europe, they don't have the nuts that we North Americans seem to enjoy. They may not even have your favorite type of coffee. I've even carried coffee from my favorite roaster in my duffel bag all the way to Europe because that's the coffee I want to drink and that's the mornings I want to have. So I do encourage people to take a look at their menu plan and their shopping list and definitely fill Ziploc bags flat and put them in with your luggage, or have all the crew members bring a little bit of this, that, and the other thing from home. Over to you, Henry.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share just a very simple sample plan that I put together. I built something like this in a spreadsheet about 20 years ago, and I just reuse it for every trip that I make. It doesn't need to be very complicated, but the key elements of where am I going from, where am I going to, what my distance is, so I know what my departure and arrival times need to be. And I always plan one or more alternate locations, and then I just rough out some basic meals that I want to plan for. It doesn't need to be complicated or exhaustive. Again, if you put the effort into planning something out in detail once, it's very easy to reuse and it becomes something that's very simple to continue with. I've got Marla's website here. She does some very similar itinerary planning. It looks a little bit different, but it accomplishes the same thing, which is just to give yourself a framework to plan to, and to make sure that you've thought about everything that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I think I should probably, at this time in my life, be doing a blog on cooking on boats and giving people ideas about how to use food. Maybe that's something I should consider for the future. We've got lots of ideas of how to accomplish that, but definitely working around restaurants. I find that being able to get off the boat for the evening meal, to go to the pub or to go to Tracy's saying, yes, please, more cooking on a boat. Okay, we'll be working on that for you. Anyway, getting off the boat and being able to go out to the pub. Quite often there's like the hockey seems to go on forever, and even spring sailing, we find that it's always great to go to a pub and see the last of the hockey games. Or was it 2 summers ago or 2 autumns ago that the Toronto Raptors were involved in the playoffs? And I had a group from Toronto out sailing around, and every night we had to be at a pub so we could watch the games, and they just had so much fun on the trip. So it does help people a lot to be able to get off the boat, but again, there's nothing like having a great steak dinner on the barbecue while your boat is sitting at a beautiful anchorage with the sun setting right down into your cockpit. It's pretty wonderful.
Absolutely. And planning simple meals doesn't mean planning untasty meals. I agree. There's lots of creative cooking that can be done, and we've certainly not been afraid to do some extravagant things on the sailboat. You just can't do it necessarily every night. So that really kind of concludes what I'll call the preliminary planning section, the things that you can do well in advance. And we wanted to move to final prep for things that you would do just a few days before. Before we do that, now is probably a good time to pause and see if there's any questions that have come in that we haven't yet addressed, or if anybody wants to send anything in before we transition to our next phase.
Yeah, we have a lovely moderator that's helping us out for the Vancouver Boat Show. His name's Bobby. So, Bobby, do you have anything that we should be addressing at this point?
Yes, we do have a raised hand actually from Colin. I'm going to open his audio channel, and Colin, if you unmute yourself, we'll be able to hear you. So there's an unmute button in the center of your screen right now. All right, let's move along, and we might be able to come back to Colin later on. We have Irina. Irina, please unmute yourself and go ahead. Okay, please click on the unmute button in the center of your screen. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you. Thank you very much for the seminar. Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Maybe you'll answer later. What documentation do I need to get the charter or boat?
Sorry, was that qualifications for the charter?
Yeah, like all documentation.
Okay, so we'll be looking for some sort of sailing school accreditation and a level of experience that would be commensurate with cruising grounds and the size of the vessel that you would be looking to charter. As Marla said, coastal navigation or some equivalent is strongly encouraged. It's not necessarily a requirement, as the basic sailing cruising will cover some basic navigation, but in our West Coast waters here, navigation is a pretty significant element of it. So getting that coastal navigation is strongly encouraged.
All right, and that was all the raised hands that we have at this point.
Terrific.
All right. Are we ready to move on to phase 2, our final prep?
Sounds good. So we definitely want to talk about weather checks. We've got a lot to say about weather, right, Henry?
It drives everything we do, it seems.
It does. So we've got some weather sites that we're going to introduce to you. We're going to talk a little bit about the apps. One of the overviews of this area that we'd like to promote for you to consider as a skipper is that our geography here really affects the weather. And during the day, a hot sunny day, you'll see that clouds get stuck up on the top of some mountains. At the end of the day, there's a big cooling effect that happens, and all cool air runs down the sides of our mountains and hits the surface of the water, and wind changes direction very quickly. Just like tides coming in from the Pacific Ocean speed up when they go through narrow passages, the same thing happens to the winds. It might be a beautiful, balmy 10-knot wind out in the Strait of Georgia, but as soon as we get into the Gulf Islands area, the wind pressure actually increases. And we just really encourage skippers to have reviewed those types of material and become aware of all of this local knowledge, so that you're always prepared for what's going on with the weather and always make the right decision to reef or not to reef, to stay at the dock or to go. Very important skipper skills that you're going to want to have in your heart and always be thinking about. What about you, Henry? What would you like to say about that?
For sure, yeah. So when I'm planning a trip, I'll start watching the weather consistently about 5 to 7 days out. It's not that I'm looking for the forecast by day. I'm looking to see what the trend is and whether the weather has been stable, whether we're seeing changes, whether the winds that we're getting are going to be consistent. And that's when I might go revisit my trip plan and my navigation. And oftentimes I'll have a couple of options for day one, depending on what the final weather and wind conditions are, especially if we've had an experience of the wind shifting from south to north. It might impact what we do on day one and what our plans are. It's also a good opportunity to finish your packing lists, again, based on what the weather forecast is looking like. Is it going to be wet? Is it going to be cold? Is it going to be warm? On the West Coast, you really need to prepare for all of the above every trip, but you may be able to have a little bit more of one than the other based on what the weather forecast is. And then, that last week or so, I start with food prep as well. So what can I prepare in advance? What do I need to buy on day of for fresh and perishables? This is really kind of the final planning. And that's often cases going to be driven by the weather and the plans that go with it. We might change whether we're going to stop at a marina or not, a pub or not. The weather can certainly have a big impact on all of that. And it's really a good opportunity to start talking about the weather and the weather impacts and the items that are available for us. So I know this is something, Marla, that you have said from experience, and I can certainly attest to it. Sailing on the West Coast here, the tides and currents are material. They are as material to your trip planning as weather. And it's something that you need to always be taking into consideration, that the water under you is moving, and your ability to go through the water, the ability to hold a course. safe distances around islands and rocks, and all of that stuff are impacted by just understanding the tides and the currents and their peak and their floods and the ability to get through these tidal passages. And the ability to pull real-time forecasts. So we often look at a long-term forecast, but it can be quite variable. And so we want you to make sure that you're familiar with getting the current real-time forecasts that are out there.
Mm-hmm. I would say that I'm checking the weather probably like the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, and about 6 times in between. And so through our Marine, Government of Canada Marine weather forecast, Henry's going to show us some of the screens that will help us a little bit about that. But also we have several apps that all of us carry on our phones and tablets. So for me, I have probably 4 different ways that I'm checking the weather and actually doing a little bit of triangulation based on where I am on the chart and what's going on at the weather reporting stations around me. So over to you, Henry, in this regard.
Yeah, so we thought we would point out, if you're not familiar with it, this is the Government of Canada Marine Weather Forecast main page. This is focused on the Pacific South Coast. As you can see, we have a lot of red. We actually have a wind warning in effect right now. And as you follow down, you can see the wind warnings, and you can have access to the specific areas of forecasts that are available. As you get into the different areas, and we'll call up the Strait of Georgia south of Nanaimo, any of the forecasts that are here, the time, the direction, and a short-term forecast. They call it an extended forecast, but it's only a few days. And it'll give us access to weather conditions throughout the area. And what you'll see marked on here are specific weather stations where we can get individual forecasts in recurring conditions. So this is something that we rely on very heavily to get our weather forecasts. I also wanted to share the base information of where these forecasts come from. So this is the second link that we have available. It explains what the weather forecast areas are on the west coast of Canada here. It tells you what the different areas mean. So when you hear them on the radio talking about the Strait of Georgia or Queen Charlotte Strait, this is letting you know what those areas are. It's telling you where the weather transmit stations are, and it's telling you also where the reporting locations are. There's a second slide which is more focused on our area here, which allows you to see the various weather reporting areas. As Marla said, what's really unique about our area is we get a single forecast for a large body of water that, because of the geography, has a lot of very regional influences. For example, this dividing line at Nanaimo separates the forecast for the Strait of Georgia north of Nanaimo, which is this entire area, versus Strait of Georgia south of Nanaimo, which is this entire area. And there's many, many very local variations within that. And understanding what each of these individual reporting elements are will help you get a better picture of what's happening across this huge body of water, because the forecast that you'll get will be for the most extreme weather anywhere in this section. That could result in very strong winds up north and very light winds down south, but the forecast will be for the heaviest winds in the forecast. It can be very frustrating to sit a day out only to find very light winds, and then the next day, the exact same forecast, you decide to go out and find yourself in heavy winds, big sea, and chop. And without understanding these subtleties, it can be quite frustrating to figure it out, because the forecast hadn't changed, but the conditions you experienced had.
Yeah,
Marla,
at this time, I don't want to say that this is a difficult thing to find out, by the way. If you are somebody who has been taking lessons or has sailed all your life and has done a coastal navigation course, or is planning or realizing that you should plan to do that this spring before you charter, the other course that you'll probably end up doing, if you don't already have it, is a VHF license. And some of this weather reporting stuff via the VHF radios will start to make a little bit more sense. And when you do a coastal navigation course, you can actually marry the VHF weather channels, weather reporting places, onto your charts. So you get more and more familiar with it. And it's really, really a simple process. But the point is that if you are a skipper and you want a charter, remember that you've got anywhere from $100,000 boat to $1 million boat. Responsibility for that boat for you and for your crew, your friends and family that are coming on board with you. So a skipper, you're getting the picture that a skipper has to really have a very extensive awareness of a lot of things. And we really, really encourage you to consider studying these further if you haven't already. And we can help you with that through online courses, just talking to you on the via email or on the phone. Never hesitate to reach out to us so we can elaborate further on these good skills to have. What do you think, Henry?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it is a very critical part. And as I said, it really dominates most of the decision making when you're out on the water. So it's good to have a good knowledge for that. I know we're starting to run a bit short on time. So there's a few other things we wanted to just point out on weather before we moved on and took some questions. But in addition to the publications, I think all of us, Marla, use some kind of electronic app. There's a few here that I think we both have used and feel provide very good information. And it really gives you that visual of some of the very regional weather patterns that you'll get. So this kind of shows a bit of a pattern on North America. I think this is windy that you like to use. Mm-hmm. Here's a couple more local examples for windy. This is Wind Finder. This is one that, Predict Wind. Let me go back a page here. That I'm familiar with. The information is similar. It's just about getting comfortable for it. And this gives you a bit of an example of how the prevailing winds can come through, and they funnel through and are stronger in sections and they're calmer in other sections. And, you know, the Gulf Islands can be calm in the south end and blowing in the north end. So these apps are also a very good way to understand these patterns and to help correlate those individual forecasts with what you're seeing. So most of these are free to download, and it's a good way to just start gaining some knowledge and experience here. And, you know, the weather can come in fast. These are some pictures that Marla's taken, and, you know, you could be in nice sunny weather and 5 minutes later you find yourself in a heavy downpour or a cloud or a storm or others. So things can happen real fast when it comes to weather.
Yeah, I want to point out that, number one, I didn't take these photos, but they were posted by friends of mine that are sailors. And this was just a few days ago in the Strait of Georgia. Beautiful day, but down, like just looking up north, there were big squalls coming in. And so we as sailors, if we were out sailing that day, we would be noticing these. And what would we be doing? We'd be reefing our sails, making sure we know where we are and heading, you know, in a direction that will help us to avoid that type of storm. Seeing something like that means you're getting wind pushed in the front of it and a lot of rain coming. So good old Strait of Georgia.
For sure. So before we move on from weather, I think now is a good time to just check and see if we've had any other questions pop up.
All right, we have Kathy asking, I have 20 plus years of sailing. I was told we need a chartering certificate to charter around the world.
Yes. Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for joining us today. Indeed, still in Canada with our charter companies here, we're going to want to see that you've got experience such as you do. That 20 years of experience sounds really fantastic. Maybe you've done some courses. Maybe you have a good understanding of coastal navigation already. But when you go over to Europe right now, all of the charter companies insist that you have proof that you've done courses. It's called an International Certificate of Competency. And it is something that we, through Nanaimo Yacht Charters, can manage for you. We'll run you through courses to upgrade what you know already. And then you will be able to achieve the International Certificate of Competency. Right now in the Caribbean, it's not needed, but there has been some talk that in the future, the charter companies that run in the Caribbean are going to require that International Certificate of Competency as well. If you would like to get in touch with the gals that run the admin office in the sailing school at Nanaimo Yacht Charters, they can even help you out further and send you a bit more detail on what that's all about. I've been chartering in the Mediterranean for many, many years. I think I'm going on almost 15 years now. And it was because of my background, I have a good resume like you do, 20 plus years. It was relatively easy for me to go through that qualification process. And when they ask me, what my qualifications are, all I do is tell them about that international certificate of competency that I have, and I carry it with me along with the VHF license when I go international. Okay.
Yep. I'd also say that it's the insurance companies that are driving a lot of these requirements as well. And so we're starting to see more consistency, certainly from country to country, with what's required, and they're looking for more formalization. If you have experience, you can often challenge the course and prove competency that way. Might be a way of getting your accreditation, but more and more the insurance companies are looking for formal accreditation.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good that you qualified that. They are indeed looking for formal accreditation.
Yeah.
So we definitely are coming closer to the end of our seminar. How about we go on to the day of the charter, day one?
Sure. Yeah, we got lots of good stuff to cover here. So let me get back to some of the content we wanted to share. So as we're getting to our final day of, there's a few things that we wanted to just cover off. One of the first pieces is just sharing with you what we view as critical skipper skill set. So the knowledge and experience that we think is critical to have to make sure that you're comfortable having a safe and comfortable trip. What you should also have and prepare for your crew, and if they don't have it, what you'll need to make sure that you teach them. And then we'll talk a little bit about, lastly, just the charter experience itself, checking in, the boat briefing, the preparation, and departure plans. So Marla, I know you're actually a very big proponent of really adopting the skipper mindset. And why don't you talk a little bit about what that means?
Sure, absolutely. I remember back very clearly to the first time I ever took it upon myself to charter a boat and go out with my friends. Fortunately, my friends were people that I'd met through drop-in racing. So we all had a little bit, we knew a little bit, but I have to say, we didn't know what we didn't know then some 20 years ago. And I am so grateful that I actually was working with the charter company and, made sailing a priority for myself. That I am astounded at what I know now compared to what I didn't know. So I really encourage people to read the right books, skippers, to read the right books, check out the articles, do the courses, sit in on webinars like North Sails, for instance, who runs an amazing sail trim course. Dominic Prenay runs a great weather course. Maybe they're pilots if you don't realize you already have a skill. If you've done a private pilot's license, you've done a really great weather course. Share the wealth with your crew, but definitely have a skipper mentality. Skippers we find typically are people who love organizing things and love being completely aware of how everything works. And they're also problem solvers, and they're project managers, and they are air traffic controllers, and they are MacGyvers. That's what a skipper mindset is all about. Keep a running dialogue in your head all the time that begins with the words, what if? What if the headstay breaks while you're, running down the Strait of Georgia or down Trincomalee Pass? What if your engine quits while you're in the middle of docking? What if a sail rips suddenly on you? What if something gets wrapped around your prop? So the more you're thinking about things that could go sideways on you, the more prepared you will be if they do. And one of those things is to be very clear that somebody has to be in charge. That is you, the skipper. But being in charge also means that you want to bring your crew up to be able to be good assistants to you, assigning them all a job. For instance, we really recommend that that you have your crew all know how to tie one knot. And in this paperwork that we've created here for you, we do have some website links to it, various links. So for instance, there's animated knots for boaters, so that you can make sure, assign one knot to learn, the crew to learn one knot, and they all know how to tie that knot when they get on board the boat. As a skipper, it will take a lot of concern and frustration, tension possibly off of your back to take care of the safety, the general safety, when you can rely on your crew to understand that they've got a specific job to do. Also, crew overboard. You know, as a skipper, it's like we get out there and go, God, we're, you know, going sailing. It's fantastic. Everybody's here. We're having a great time. We've got great food. But nobody ever takes the time to practice a couple of crew overboard rescues. Really, really important as a skipper that you've got that skill nailed. Can't promote it enough. And there are things that you can do, like the simple act of heaving to and getting the boat stopped and taking a moment to mark the water where the person went overboard, and to make a plan really quickly with that person in the water in sight of you. Those are some skills that you really, as a skipper, need to be on top of. Understanding why reefing your sails is a really, really important thing. Know how to reef your sails before you leave the dock, and know that at least one person on your crew knows how to do that as well. Lots of stuff. I want to just impress upon you, those of you that want to be skippers as well. A skipper is not the person that's got their hands glued to the wheel all the time. That's a helmsman. So as a skipper, it's not about just driving the boat. It is about being in charge and conscious of all of the important skills and processes that you have to go through. The navigation, observing the weather, observing how the safety of your crew. Is anybody suffering from hypothermia, for instance, or is anybody in the process of maybe doing something that's a little dangerous for them? So being able to move around the boat freely and keep an eye on all of the processes of managing that trip that you're on, meanwhile assigning somebody to be on the helm. That's the skipper mentality. Maybe I'm talking a little too much there. I better have a sip of water. Henry, what would you like to add at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that. I would say, you know, probably maybe the one idea that people struggle with a little bit, and maybe can sometimes be a bit contentious, especially if you're, you know, sailing with family, friends, or your spouse, is this idea that one person must be in charge. And it's not about better or worse, or being the boss or not being the boss. I like to think about it like a high-performing sports team. You've got a whole array of athletes who are the best at what they do, but there's only one coach for a reason. You need to have unified decision making. You need to have one person who's responsible for just coordinating everybody, and it doesn't make you better. It just makes you the person making the decisions. I travel with friends that are more accomplished sailors than I am, but we all take turns being in charge, and it doesn't make one of us more important than the other. It just means somebody's got to be making decisions. And as a skipper, it's not just about what you know, it's about the capabilities of the boat, it's about your experience, and it's about the ability of the crew. And that needs to go into all of the decision making. Just because you know something that might make sense in a situation, you've got to evaluate if you can actually execute it given the resources that you have. And that's that general manager mindset. It's not just about what you and maybe even the boat can do. It's about what collectively you can deliver as a team. So I think that's really important. We've got a list of what we think must-have competencies are. We'll make this deck available for you. Marla's talked about all of them or most of them already. I think in the interest of time, we'll let you work through these on your own. But you need to be prepared to execute on all of these out of the gate. And I think the real important item to consider is an issue is not going to wait till day 4. It could happen anytime. And so you need to be ready when you leave the dock, that you're ready and capable to execute against all of these competencies before you leave. Some of the other items around preparing your crew, some basic things like assign daily tasks and responsibilities. You want to make sure that everybody has a job and understands what that job is, or you've agreed that they aren't participating. In some cases, I go cruising with people who just want to be on vacation. That's fine too, but we need to know that we've got all of the roles covered and that everybody can play a role, especially if we need to. Things like confirming emergency procedures in advance. If we had a fire, do we need to designate somebody to man the radio? Do we need to designate somebody to man the fire extinguisher? Is there somebody who's maybe got some medical experience? Those are things that you're going to want to think about before you need them. So getting that prepared and ready. And really, before you leave the dock, understand the skills, knowledge, and experience of the crew who are going with you so that you're not surprised and you know what sort of decisions you'll have to make as the general manager based on the resources that you have. Again, we'll share some of this with you, some basic knots that all of the crew should know. There's some great videos here to help you prepare for the crew. And then we wanted to touch just real briefly on day of, the important things to do for a crew briefing before you leave the dock. One of the things that we talked about a bunch before the start was just the boat briefing. Instruct people how to use the head. If they've never been on a boat before, it's not as simple and obvious as it might seem. And a very simple discussion about what to flush or not. So for those with sailing experience can attest, the heads on the boats are notoriously finicky, and making a bad choice of flushing something can have a very negative effect. It's something that your guests need to understand, and it's often an uncomfortable conversation you may need to have with what do you flush or not, but it's a very important one. Some basics: how to turn on the stove, how to use the lights. Maybe you've got some saltwater and freshwater pumps, how to raise and lower the dinghy. Just make sure, again, before you leave the dock, that people are familiar and comfortable with some of these basic skills. And you certainly need to do a safety briefing for everybody on board. Life jackets, is there one that fits for everybody? Do they know where it is? Is it underway? What requirements will you as a skipper have for your crew around wearing a life jacket? It's not required by law, and you are often traveling with adults, but you are the skipper. What are your requirements going to be for the person who's responsible for the crew in the boat? I will often require life jackets to be worn when we're underway for the first 2 days, no matter what, until you get your sea legs. In heavy weather, no matter what. Under sail, no matter what. You'll need to think about what those requirements are for you and make sure that you convey them. One hand for you, one hand for the boat. Make sure that they know how to move around the boat safely. Just an understanding of the ropes and the sails and the fact that things are moving as you're sailing, and to be mindful of that, and to make sure that your crew understand where all of the safety equipment is located and how to use it if need be. These are all things that you're going to want to know before you leave the dock, because things happen very fast out there. As I said, emergencies don't wait till day 4. It can happen minutes from the dock. Marla, have you had any urgent experiences at the dock?
Have I had some urgent experiences at the dock?
Yeah.
Sure. People leaving the dock and forgetting to unplug the power line, or forgetting that their dinghy is still tied to the dock instead of to the boat, or a rope is, somebody's lost track of a docking line and it's ended up wrapped around the prop. We see those types of things happen all the time.
Losing steerage in a marina is very easy to happen and very difficult to correct at the same time.
Yeah. So I'd also this time like to say, I know that we're running out of time. My goodness, it's so great, all the stuff we have to share. But these documents, again, are going to be available through Nanaimo Yacht Charters with all of our points available for people to read upon their own and then get back to us via email or telephone to the yacht charter company, so we can help people out further and beyond just this time slot that we have. Okay?
For sure. We've got a few sections left. Do we have some questions that came up? I think I saw some flashing there. Do we want to pause and take a few more as we're quickly running out of time?
Sure, we're down to 1 minute, so we might be able to squeeze one in. Here's Kathy saying, what are all the costs that we need to plan for when considering chartering?
All of the costs?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Kathy. So number one, obviously, there's going to be the cost of the boat and the insurance package that goes along with it. And that's something that you'll be able to work out with the charter company. You can give the charter company a call or an email and they will send you a quote. Then, of course, you're going to have your food costs. You're going to have fuel costs because you have to top up the fuel when you return the boat to the marina. And then while you're out and about, you may actually like to stay at marinas quite often. So you're going to be looking at costs of anywhere from $1.50 to $3 per foot, depending on which marina that you're going to. And also then they sometimes charge extra for power. And there are a couple of places that charge extra to take your, as I said before, your garbage bags. And then, of course, beverages. But I think that that's the cost that you should be prepared for. Maybe no one owns a headlamp or sailing gloves. Not that you have to go and spend $65 on a pair of sailing gloves, but just a pair of lightweight gloves from, Mark's Work Warehouse, and a headlamp, so you don't have to leave the boat lights on at nighttime. You can read in bed with your own personal headlamp. Conserving resources is an important thing on a boat. Henry, was there anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I mean, I think that's covered. I would say just in terms of thinking about costs, when I plan the trips, I wind up with somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 per person for like 7 to 10 days, all inclusive. If that gives you a bit of an idea of what the budget would be, and that's your charter costs, your food, drink, insurance, fuel. It's actually a pretty inexpensive all-inclusive when you consider that all of your entertainment is included. So it's pretty cost-effective. But I found that to be a pretty reasonable. You can go for more, you can go for less. It depends on how extravagant your meal plans are and your activities. But that's I found to be pretty solid planning.
Great.
I see from Rob asking if there's a copy of the slideshow. So yes, we will be posting this and making it available at the end. There's some content we haven't got to yet. I thought as we move to close off the show, I would maybe share some of the pearls of wisdom that that we collected here as we were preparing for the presentation.
All right.
And are there any other final questions here as we come to slide?
Actually, I'm afraid we have run out of time and we're over at this point. But in any case, I would like to thank you, Marla and Henry, for a very, very informative session. It's been great to have you here, and everybody else who has joined us. Thank you for coming, and thank you for being at the VIBS. Let's acknowledge our sponsors. This event is sponsored by Freedom Marine Yacht Sales in Vancouver. Please be sure to check out all our features at VIBS, like the online info booth, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the show.
Thank
Thanks
you,
everyone for joining us. Hope to see you at our booth. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bobby.